This team has great depth. Davion McKnight knows how to run the offense. By all accounts, Ryan Comwell and Dante Maddox have fit in well. Dalen Swain's going to make a leap, and Trey Green, don't forget about him either. Xavier's got more options and they have minutes available. That's a really nice problem to have. That says second weekend.
This is the Sean Miller Podcast, presented by Deer Park Roofing. Now, here's your hosts, Paul Fritchner and Adam Baum, with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.
Welcome into another episode of the Sean Miller Podcast. Paul Fritchner alongside Adam Baum, and it is a very special episode of the show today because we are joined for the first time by a repeat guest, John Fanta. Welcome to the show, John Fanta. As always, this is presented by Deer Park Roofing and the official payroll sponsor of the Sean Miller Podcast, Payroll Partners. Sean could not be with us today. Just been a busy week for Sean out on the road recruiting and a few other commitments that he had, but we thought after the schedule got released, we're recording this on Friday morning. The schedule got released yesterday. There is no bigger, maybe week of the off season than the Christmas week when you get the schedule and the hype is building for basketball. That's about 50 days around the corner. John Fanta, welcome back to the Sean Miller Podcast.
Gentlemen, Sean really must be busy because his Steelers are 1-0 and the rest of the AFC North is 0-1. And he really could have had a field day with me on this show. So I've never been happier to not see Sean Miller on the Sean Miller Podcast because that wouldn't have ended well for me. Would have ended with an L like last Sunday. But it's great to be with you. And yes, there is a crispness. There's a freshness to seeing a new Big East schedule. Never are you going to see people get more passionate for a 10 home, 10 road game split. But there are so many quirks to a schedule and intricacies to a schedule, and we finally got to lay our eyes on the entire thing on Thursday. And I'm really intrigued heading into this year because the Big East has always had an ability to respond when adversity hits them. And let's face it, adversity is staring this league in the face right now, coming off of last year. And it's weird to say that when you've won a national championship back-to-back. But I'm talking about volume of NCAA tournament bids, and I think that's what the conference is trying to figure through this upcoming season.
The way I'll start this, John, I was going back and listening to when you came on the show last year, and the four of us were sitting there on a couch and having some fun. It was the second episode of the show, and anybody that's maybe listening to this that didn't go back and listen to that, I think there was a lot of evergreen content in that show. But one of the things that we talked about a lot was how we thought that last year was going to be one of the better Big East seasons that we'd remembered. There was a lot of anticipation, a lot of returning talent. And then you get to March, and a lot of teams had good seasons, but there were a lot of bubble teams that got left out, and you end up with just 3 teams in the NCAA tournament. Now you go into this year, and you think to yourself, all right, league's got to get back on track. You got to get some more bids in the tournament. It seems, at least to me on paper, like it's stacked up to be a 5 or 6 bid league. We'll start it off with that, John. How do you see it?
I do think it's back to being a 5 or 6 bid league, and you never know if you much rather be in the 6 or 7 bid conversation on Selection Sunday. But the league has averaged around 5.5 bids per year, so it makes sense to say 5 or 6 bid league. Look, UConn, Creighton, Xavier, Marquette, to me, are all pretty safely there. I have a hard time believing any of those teams would not be in the NCAA tournament. That's what I think of all 4 of those teams. At that point, it comes down to a couple of teams, and the fact is, guys, St. John should be better than they were last year. I think that they've got better guard play and more veterans on their team. Kadari Richmond and Davon Smith, we'll get to them, but those 2 were home runs by Rick Pitino. Providence, if Bryce Hopkins is back and healthy, what would have happened last year if Bryce Hopkins stayed healthy with that version of Devin Carter? They're a tournament team. Seton Hall, I will now say it because I'm done getting duped. And I think you guys are probably done too. I think a lot of people are just going to put them 8th or 9th again. I just don't trust that. I think that they've got one of the better coaches in the league, and they play so hard. I'm more bullish on Seton Hall than I am Butler, Villanova, Georgetown, or DePaul. And maybe it's coming off an NIT championship, even though you had roster turnover. I just think that creates good vibes. you both would know a thing or two about what an NIT championship can do for a program and for the momentum of a program. So, you know what? I think that this league is in good shape, but you got to put results together. We saw mixed non-conference scheduling strategies, but a good amount of non-conference schedules that frankly were underwhelming on paper. What does that mean? Well, you're going to try to do what some of the Big 12 teams did last year. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you're going to try to beat these teams by 25, 30, 35 points, help your net, and do what you believe is best for your resume. And here's the thing. I'm not going to sit here and argue it until it doesn't work out. So from my standpoint, if that's what it takes to get to the NCAA tournament, Providence, besides Atlanta, is scheduled fairly easy. Seton Hall, besides Charleston, scheduled fairly easy. So could go on and on, but we did see some teams take a different approach to how they non-conference schedule. You better beat up on people then and help your metrics.
John, I think it's a real blessing that we get you this week. It's been a big week for the Phantom Machine. I think you went viral twice. You had a pretty legendary Browns rant on Sunday. And then yesterday, shout out Red Robin. I think Red Robin's severely underrated. But I think the most logical place to start, right, is everyone's talking about UConn. They're at the mountaintop of college basketball, have been for the last 2 years. What does it look like in your mind in terms of the viability that they could put a run together for a three-peat? Obviously, they have a system. They have the coach. Their personnel is going to look a lot different this year than it has the last 2 years.
Yes, it will look a lot different. Gone is Donovan Clingan. Gone is Stephon Castle. Gone is Tristan Newton, and gone is Cam Spencer. So those four were so vital. But previously, you could say that about Adama Sanogo and about Jordan Hawkins and Andre Jackson. There's a couple things at play. Number one, right now, UConn has the best coach in the nation and the best staff in the country because of how they've mastered offense. Dan Hurley has truly mastered offense. But that offense entails something. Perimeter shot making. And a lot of offenses do. But when UConn's not making threes and you're daring some of their non-shooters to shoot and they're not making those shots, it's a different story than what we've seen the last 2 years. Last year, you could not pick your poison in any way. You had to hope and pray that they were going to be off on a night. They were off at Creighton. They were off at Seton Hall. They were on at Kansas. They were off outside Tristan Newton that night, but they Tristan Newton went nuclear, but they lost. Outside of that, they were perfect. That's not going to be this team. They're not going to go 37-3. They will go through a bit of a tough patch. December, for them, think about this. They're going to have Baylor at Texas. Baylor's top 10 team, Texas top 30 team on the road. Gonzaga, top 10 team at Madison Square Garden. Gonzaga out for revenge. Home to Xavier. Great job by the Big East to schedule UConn and Xavier early. I know that, some Xavier fans and Sean Miller might not love that, but for the sake of the league, I think it's marquee. I think it's fun. And then at Butler, they've owned Butler, but going to Hinkle, you just never know what can happen inside that building. I think that for Connecticut, here's what the pathway comes down to. Number one, Hassan Diarra, taking the mantle, being that dude at point guard. Number two, how he works with Aiden Mahaney. Mahaney was a St. Mary's transfer, a terrific ad by Dan Hurley. I think that that's really, really important. Number three, the development of the sophomores, Jalen Stewart, Solomon Ball, and company. I expect Liam McNeely to be one of the best freshmen in the country. I really do. In fact, if I didn't vote Cooper Flagg as preseason freshman of the year, and I think he will be, I think he'll be the freshman of the year, I might vote Liam McNeely. I think that's how good McNeely's going to be. Alex Caravan, that's a given. The biggest key for Connecticut, what has UConn had the last 2 years that other teams haven't? A tandem at the five.
Yeah.
They could go from Adama Sanogo to Donovan Clingan, then Donovan Clingan to Samson Johnson. This year, Samson Johnson to Terrace Reed. On paper, guys, that's a drop-off. How does that get handled? Are they still as vicious on the glass? Are they still as connected offensively? Neither of those two guys can really shoot the basketball. So that's interesting. But I think that I'm not questioning Hassan Diarra's ability to run point. He's not Tristan Newton, but he's still tough. He is one tough you-know-what. And I'm not questioning McNeely and Caravan being able to hit perimeter shots. The Big East is a league where you got to be tough inside. And there's a number of teams that have that. UConn has options, but it's got to come to fruition.
The Sean Miller Podcast is proud to partner with Deer Park Roofing, a company that's provided elite service for homes and businesses since 1996 and leads the industry in professionalism, quality, and responsiveness. Whether your needs are residential or commercial, like the outstanding work on the Cintas Center, the home of Xavier basketball, Deer Park can handle any job and ensure it's done right. Deer Park's motto is protect what's important, and what's important to you is important to Deer Park Roofing. Visit deerparkroofing.com.
A place like Xavier University, with the history and tradition on the court, the academic excellence and what this place stands for, where we play for the win, we play for the good shot. You know, it's all about the final score. You have to be yourself. The authentic person who you truly are stands out. I take the mantle of being the head coach at Xavier very seriously. We're supposed to win.
All right, John, Adam and I were trying to cook up some things for you, and you just talked a lot about Connecticut. But what we're going to do here is we're going to give you about a 5-minute segment. I'm going to put a timer on the clock, and we're going to start again with Connecticut. We're going to roll down through the Big East standings from last year, and you're just going to give 30 seconds, and if you're mid-sentence, I'm cutting you off. 30 seconds on every team, and maybe what the fans or people that haven't followed the offseason or people going into the season need to know about that team as we head into 24 and 25. Sound good to you?
Let's do this.
All right. So what I'm going to do for people that are listening on audio, if you can go onto YouTube, also subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow us on social media at Sean Miller Pod. If you're listening, leave a rating and a review on Apple and Spotify. I don't shout that out enough. Thanks to everybody that does that already. I'm going to show my phone here on the screen, count it down, and we'll just keep restarting as we go along. Sound good to you, John?
Yes, it does.
All right, we're going to start here with the Connecticut Huskies. 3, 2, 1, go.
Well, trying to do something that only John Wooden and UCLA can say that they have done. Dan Hurley has built a machine. This is a team that's going to need two things to happen. One, Tristan Newton passes the torch now to Hassan Diarra and Aiden Mahaney. The front court has a new look, but UConn, the Big East runs through them. The nation runs through them. They're a top 3 team in the country. Alex Caravan, first-team All-American material.
1 second to spare. Creighton, go.
Stephen Ashworth is back, so they have point guard play. Ryan Kalkbrenner returns, so they have play at the 5. And he can join Patrick Ewing as the only 2 to be named 4-time Big East Defensive Player of the Year. Pop Isaacs was a terrific transfer portal addition from Texas Tech. And Fedor Zugic is a late pickup from Montenegro at 6'6" that will help in the perimeter shooting department. The Jays are top 15 worthy. They're number 2 for me.
Marquette.
Well, Tyler Kolek and Oso Ighodaro are not walking through that door. Cam Jones will be in the Big East Player of the Year race. He is an undoubted Big East first-team selection, could be on the All-American radar. They're going to need him to average around 20 points per game. Stevie Mitchell's got to be able to shoot the basketball better. He's been a liability there. Chase Ross is tough. David Joplin, consistency, David. You can't disappear. I think he's got it in him. Ben Gold, breakout season. Sophomore class has to be key. I wouldn't doubt Shaka.
Your Seton Hall Pirates.
Well, a lot of roster turnover, but Scotty Middleton, I expect to be a stud. Ohio State transfer, Seton Hall originally recruited him and fell through. Middleton will be big time for this team, I'm telling you. Chauncey Jenkins, another guy, comes from ODU and was a really nice ad for them. Prince Aligbe, physicality, length. They have a lot of, they're going to be a team that has like 8 guys who average between 7 and 12 points per game. Key player, Yacine Toomey. Can Isaiah Coleman take a leap?
St. John's Red Storm.
Well, now is the time for Rick Pitino, because if you go 2 years and you haven't made the NCAA tournament, people are going to start asking, are they just cursed? They're not. Kadari Richmond, Davon Smith in the backcourt. I want to see if Simeon Wilcher and Brady Dunlap can make a leap. How is their perimeter shooting? Gone is Joel Soriano, but Here come Zubi Ejiofor and Vincent Iwuchukwu, the USC transfer. X Factor, Aaron Scott, North Texas transfer. I think they're a tournament team.
The Cleveland Browns.
Miserable quarterback acquisition. The worst quarterback acquisition, maybe the worst player acquisition we've ever seen. I'm not done on them, though. I'm not out on them. I'm not. And that's why I got so frustrated Sunday. This team still has one of the best defenses in the NFL. They still have a really good wide receiver core, and Nick Chubb's coming back. Deshaun Watson will make his last start as the Cleveland Browns quarterback this Sunday in Jacksonville. Change is coming. The Browns are not done.
The Villanova Wildcats.
Critical year for Kyle Neptune. Eric Dixon is one of the best players in the Big East, but every time we start the conversation with Eric Dixon, it's got to end with, it's got to be more than him. He can't do it all himself. Couple of keys. Jameer Brickus is a transfer point guard from the Philadelphia area who's got to be key for this team. Wooga Poplar comes in from Miami, and Jordan Longino, it's time for you to step up. But Brickus comes in from LaSalle. He's got to be big.
The Friars, Providence.
Well, the wildest fan base in the country will have a team that will be in the NCAA tournament mix. What version of Bryce Hopkins are we getting? But Kim English cleaned up in the transfer portal. Jabri Abdur-Rahim from Florida State. Krista Sandico from St. Joe's. Wesley Cardette from Chicago State. Bensley Joseph from Miami. Can Jaden Pierre now be a veteran point guard in this league? It's a big question. Can a Sandico hold up?
Xavier Musketeers.
Top 20 team. Zach Fremantle coming back. Feels like he's been around for 10 years. I'm just so glad that he's going to be back on the floor again. Same goes for Jerome Hunter. I remember the Xavier staff telling me at the end of last year they were so excited that Davion McKnight was going to be back for this season. Well, they got him Dante Maddox and Ryan Conwell, who are both studs and I think going to help. I like the acquisition of John Hughley. That guy, he's good for 5 fouls. Xavier will be tough, and they'll be in the mix.
The Butler Bulldogs.
Well, Jameel Telfort and Pierre Brooks, you guys can play horse because those two are going to be getting a ton of shots a game. I have 2 questions for Butler. Number 1, what are they doing at point guard? What is the plan at point guard? How do they manage that? Number 2, is Andre Screen the starting center? And if he is, how much is Thad Matta going to go smaller, or is this what's going to happen? Patrick McCaffrey, nice ad. Connor McCaffrey getting added to the staff means Caitlin Clark at Hinkle.
The Pittsburgh Steelers.
Oh, man. Mike Tomlin has mastered this way of winning. And guess what it is? It's disgusting, ugly football. I mean, they won a game last Sunday where they did not score a touchdown. They didn't score. They scored 18 points off field goals. So you know what? If that's what makes you all happy, it fits the mantra of the terrible towel. They win in a terrible way. You're not winning a Super Bowl playing that way.
Georgetown.
Well, there's only one way they can go in year 2 under Ed Cooley, and we know which way that is. Malik Mack was a terrific pickup from Harvard. And Ed Cooley brings in another big freshman class. He has it different from other coaches in that he has a large NIL pot. Thomas Sorber will be one of the best freshmen in the Big East. Drew Fielder, time to make a leap. But Georgetown's strength, Malik Mack, Jaden Epps, Micah Peavy. That backcourt's capable and good.
Is DePaul back?
Well, for them to be back, they would have had to arrive. But they might finally arrive. And by arrive, I mean they could get like 6 Big East wins. And I think we all would agree that's a step in the right direction. Yes, I think they'll get like 5 or 6 Big East wins. I do. I think they'll still be in the back end of the league. But I think the league's going to have some more parity at the bottom this year than it has. That team's got some talent. Connor Enright comes in from Indiana State. Leighton Blocker comes in from Arkansas. Chris Holtman knows how to coach. They'll get 5 or 6.
That's John Fanta, 6 minutes on the Big East.
It's fun watching you work, John.
You just got in the kitchen, John. Cooked it up.
Thank you, guys. You look surprised that I said 5 or 6 Big East wins.
Yeah, that was the first thing I was going to follow up on. DePaul, 5 or 6 Big East wins. Now, let me ask you, where do those come from?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. You know where they come from? Some of the close games that team has agonizingly lost. are going to turn into a couple of wins. And that's not going to – here's the thing. Like, let's take a look at we can go through their roster, but there's still a bunch of unknown. But I want to go through their schedule, right? So when we look at their schedule, all right, they're going to start the year with Southern Indiana, Prairie View A&M, Mercer, Duquesne, Eastern Illinois, Northern Illinois, and Valpo. I just counted 7-0. I'm going to call it right now. They're going to start the year 7-0. They're not going to lose any of those games. It's not Tony Stubblefield or Dave Lato. This is Chris Holtmann. He's not. If he loses to one of those teams, I got some questions. I like them to win all those games. Then things pick up. At Texas Tech, you're not winning that game. Home to Providence is a big opportunity for them, right? Then they go to St. John's. The students won't be on campus. It's in Queens. I mean, I think St. John's will beat them, but the problem with them is January stinks. You know, their start to the new year, they have UConn on New Year's Day. Happy New Year. Then at Villanova, at Seton Hall, home Xavier, home Marquette. Brutal. So, but when you look at their back end, right? Back end, February 19th, home St. John's. Not impossible. Home Butler, winnable. At Creighton, that's a loss. At Providence, they've given Providence some games. Home Georgetown. Is there a world where they win 3 of 5 to close the regular season? And I'm giving them 2 other wins the remainder of conference play. You know? No. In fact, the hardcore Big East people know this. For whatever reason, DePaul's been playing their best right around the time of the Big East tournament and typically has given a team a game, if not won a game in the Big East tournament. It's weird, but we know that for a fact. They beat Seton Hall a couple years ago in what was a gut punch. You know, did they beat Xavier one year?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, they have.
Yeah.
They beat Providence one year. DePaul's actually won in the Big East tournament fairly recently with some awful teams. Let's face it. This team will be better. You know, I think it's just role allocation. How do they all come together? I'm hearing a lot of good things.
Well, to be clear, John, the game that DePaul beat Xavier in the Big East tournament, that doesn't count. That was the COVID year. We wiped that game from the slate.
Was that oh, yeah, that's right.
That was the one game that happened, or whatever, 2 games.
Yeah. Then DePaul beat Providence the next year in the actual COVID tournament with nobody in the stands. So NJ Benson's going to be interesting. This guy's a junior who is 6'8" and who they're high on transfer from Missouri State, all Missouri Valley caliber player. You know, they've got some talent. They brought in CJ Gunn. They brought in Connor Emright. They brought in Layden Blocker. And here's the thing. They can't be any worse. They got a coach who was at Ohio State and took Butler to a Sweet 16. And they're spending money like a real Big East program now. Like they got an influx of cash. The school realizes they got to be better. So I think their days of being a joke are over, a total joke. I really do believe that.
The Sean Miller Podcast is proud to partner with Payroll Partners, where you're not just a number. That means providing a best-in-class HR and payroll experience that was built on award-winning technology and live support customer service with a dedicated payroll specialist who's just a phone call away. You shouldn't have to choose between technology and customer service. At Payroll Partners, you get both. Payroll Partners is locally owned and operated by a proud Xavier alum. Visit payrollpartners.net. That's payrollpartners.net. Stop renting your power, own it. TGE Solar makes it easy to purchase solar panels for your home or business so you can take control of your monthly electricity bill and start saving today. They'll help you find the best solar system to meet your needs, and their expert in-house installation team makes the process seamless. They're proud to be based in Cincinnati, family owned and operated by a Xavier alum. Mention this podcast and save $1,000. Visit TGESolar.com to request your free energy evaluation today.
All right, John, we are on the Sean Miller Podcast. We'd be remiss if we didn't have a little bit more of a conversation about the Musketeers. So I think from my vantage point, and I think Paul would agree with this, like Sean has said this numerous times, that this is one of the deeper teams he's had especially since returning to Xavier. It's also one of the more talented teams. Why do you think they're a top 20 team? Go behind the curtain.
Well, you have to start by saying this. Last year went about as poorly as it could by Sean Miller standards. So your first inclination is they're not going to do that again. So the second thing is, why did they have that problem? They weren't deep enough. They also, some of the pieces they were relying on were either in their first year of the program or too young. That's no longer an issue for this team. When they got Dante Maddox and Ryan Conwell, two transfers who fit what they're doing. I love Conwell's game. And just texting with Sean casually in real time here over the summer, it was easy to see how much he liked Ryan Conwell and how much of a leap I think he expects from Dalen Swain. There seems to be some really good headway there. So that's just it. Like, their bench has starting caliber players on it. That's why I think that Xavier's in a really good place. Swain, Trey Green, you bring in Marcus Foster from Furman, who was a part of success at Furman under Bob Ritchie. This team from top to bottom, and now having a front court back, and you knock on wood and say, you hope they stay fully healthy. But guys, if there is an issue, this team has reinforcements. John Hughley was a diamond pickup. I had him back at Pitt, and I'll tell you what, he's a good player. He is a good player who's tough and is going to be physical and is going to defend. And you lost Quincy Oliveri and Desmond Claude, but after that, you bring a lot back, and you have roster retention and address the needs that you needed to address on this roster. So in my mind, they got much better. They have a coach who's hungry and is not known to have back-to-back tough seasons. They're going to make the tournament. And I think they have a lot more knowns than the rest of the Big East. I think that, for me, I want to see how the team comes together on the defensive end of the floor in these games, and can they defend, rack up stops, and stack them together. I don't think they have no shortage of scoring in my mind, no shortage of offensive opportunities with this team. I think for them, it's getting their best defensive five. And, when we look at their schedule here, this team's going to get challenged, coming off the Cincinnati game, having to play UConn, and that early league schedule is not exactly the most forgiving with them Marquette. Seton Hall's then manageable, and at Georgetown for sure. But, this is a team that, provided they get a good Wake Forest team in their building, but there's no reason why they can't go into conference play with, no more than 2 losses. I really believe that that's the type of team they can be.
Yep.
Yes. So if you build off of that, John, and you look at the way the conference schedule, or really just the schedule as a whole, since you brought it up, shakes out, to me, you play 10 times on the road, 10 times at home. There are always going to be little patches of difficulty in there. You're going to have stretches where you play 5 out of 7 on the road, or whatever that is. The late part of January stuck out to me in that regard, where you're playing 5 games on the road, early part of February too, and mixed in there is a UConn home game. But in general, to me, I thought that this is one of Xavier's best schedules that I can remember. I don't think there is any particularly difficult stretch outside of that at the late part of January. You play Wake Forest at home. You have a pretty good non-conference schedule. You go down to Fort Myers. You have a tournament that involves South Carolina, Michigan, Virginia Tech. You play a Big 12 team in Cincinnati. You're also on the road in the Big 12 at TCU. You challenge yourself. You prepare yourself. And, oh, by the way, you're playing Dayton in an exhibition on the road at UD Arena that's probably going to be sold out with 14,000 people that don't want to see you there. So I think as a whole, you finish the season with 2 out of 3 at home, and to me, this feels like a pretty good schedule for Xavier.
Yes, it does, and it is. I think there's one really difficult stretch. I think it comes, in a 7-game window from January 18th to February the 12th. Jan 18 at Marquette, Jan 22 at St. John's at the Garden, home to UConn, at Creighton. Then they have Georgetown at home. But if you remember, Georgetown took them, you both remember that game last year. That could have almost spelled disaster for Xavier, but was that close.
You were on the call, right? Yeah.
Well,
Xavier at Georgetown?
At Georgetown I was, but Georgetown at Xavier did not that go down the very final week?
They both did.
They both did, yeah.
At Villanova, at Providence. So you have 5 out of 7 on the road. And, one of the home games is UConn. So when you look at that, that's going to be a challenging stretch. But I think the non-con was really well constructed. I think the Fort Myers event is very winnable for them. And, you want to schedule MTEs that make sense for where you are. And I really like that MTE for them. South Carolina and then either Michigan or Virginia Tech. I think they'll get Michigan in the final of that. That's a great matchup there Thanksgiving week. And then you got TCU, down there. They're going to be tough, but they're beatable. And I got to tell you what, if you're going to play a Big 12 team on the road, you want to play down in Fort Worth. TCU, I mean, with all due respect, they don't have many basketball fans, nor alone in December. So I'm just telling you how it is. That place is not a particularly hard place to play. So I expect Xavier to be able to, potentially have success there. And then we all know December 14th. I mean, I think it's the biggest Xavier-Cincinnati game we've seen in years. I really think it will be. And, Cincinnati is going to have a tough team. They're best under Wes Miller, Day-Day Ames and company. A lot of returning experience. So I know we're all looking forward to seeing how that ends up. But the schedule was really well put together. And I think, that Jan 18 to Feb 12 stretch is tough. But I think Xavier starts reasonably okay. I know they start with UConn, but UConn has struggled in conference openers. I think Xavier finishes reasonably okay, which is what you want going in the Garden.
Yeah, so feet to your fire. When they go to the Garden, do they go there having to do work to boost up their resume, or they're a ready-made team, you think?
No, they're a 2 or 3 seed, and they're well in the NCAA tournament. I think that this is a team that makes
2 or 3 seed in the Big East tournament, or 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Well, if you're a 2 or 3 seed in the Big East tournament, you're probably around a 2 or 3 or 4, 5 at worst in the NCAA tournament this particular year. I mean, I'd be very surprised if they're worse than that. That means the Big East did not have a good year, and I think this league's going to respond here and have a bounce back season. I think there were a lot of metrics outliers last year. So I think that there'll be a 2 or 3 seed in the Big East tournament, and somewhere I'm gonna put them on the 3 or 4 line in NCAA projections. I think that they're a top 20 team, and when you're a top 20 team and you build your resume the right way, they should be there. I think that's their expectation. I think Sean and his staff expect to be right around there. Of course, could you be a 6 seed, in the NCAA tournament and be a 3 in the Big East tournament? Yeah, sure. And you know what? There's nothing wrong with that if you're playing your best basketball going in the Garden. But if this team's worse than a 6 seed, it means that there was some disappointment, because I do think that they're that good.
So I cut you off, John, a little bit. You feel like this is a second weekend team?
I do think it's a second weekend team, and when you get to the second weekend, anything can happen. I think for them, it's just there's an unknown element to Fremantle and Hunter until they get back on the floor and playing in games, right? We all think we know what we're going to see, but sometimes you don't know until you start playing. You talked to Villanova last year. They didn't know what they were going to get out of Justin Moore. So, you and the year before. So, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what you're going to see from certain players when they come off that long of an injury. I just know how hard Zach plays the game and how hard Jerome Hunter plays the game and how much the management of minutes is going to be interesting, right? Because you don't want to go 0 to 100. I mean, those two guys want to, but I think that Sean and his staff will try to be conscious of that. This is why the depth piece is there. I mean, I say this because of the depth. This team has great depth. Davion McKnight knows how to run the offense. By all accounts, Ryan Comwell and Dante Maddox have fit in well. Dalen Swain's going to make a leap. And Trey Green, don't forget about him either. Xavier's got more options and they have minutes available. That's a really nice problem to have. That says second weekend.
John, are you a fan of drinking water?
I am a fan of drinking.
There you go. That's the correct answer.
I am.
Adam's been on a health kick with me over the last year or so because I'm not the biggest fan of drinking water, John.
But he's getting better.
Him and Sean ambushed me at the end of last episode. What I will say to clarify that answer is that maybe I don't like drinking water, but because of Adam's peer pressure, I have gotten significantly better at drinking water, and your boy is much better hydrated than I was 14 months ago.
Well, it's a bold strategy of Adam to talk to me about talking to somebody about drinking some water. But you know, I've been accused of carrying water. But in terms of drinking water, you know, yes, I need to drink more water. I drink it every night before I go to bed, and then when I wake up in the morning, and somehow my mouth is still dry, which tells me I need to be drinking more water. But I did have Pliables this morning. I'm working on, you know, I think you're going to see a fresher figure come November 4th here. We're trimming down heading into the season, which I'm excited about. So I'll keep you guys updated on that, but I am going to drink more water because water makes you fuller, and it's just water.
Water is life.
Paul is a stick, so you know, he can.
We're trending up in that direction, though, John. We're trending up. We're getting there.
Yep. He's beefing up.
We're beefing up. All right. John, I hope we see you around the Cintas Center at some point this year, or whether it's at Cintas or on the road, wherever it is. We appreciate you joining the Sean Miller podcast, and hopefully we can get the four of us back in the same spot for an episode in person some point down the line.
Thank you, fellas. Let's definitely do it. Hope everybody in Cincinnati is well and gearing up for a big-time Xavier season. Thanks to both of you for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks, this has been the Sean Miller Podcast presented by Deer Park Roofing and the official payroll sponsor of the Sean Miller Podcast. That's John Fanta. That's Adam Baum. I'm Paul Fritchner. Signing off. We'll see you next week on the Sean Miller Podcast.
This has been the Sean Miller Podcast presented by Deer Park Roofing with your hosts, Paul Fritchner and Adam Baum. Join us again soon for another episode with the head coach of the Xavier Musketeers, Sean Miller.